Call us today on 577 for help. This message is brought to you by Say What in partnership with United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, and the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe.
We welcome you to this program brought to us by Say What in partnership with the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe and UNFPA. We're talking about drug and substance abuse, the gaps in Zimbabwe's legal system. And to help us with that conversation is Christian Chikengeje. He is a lawyer, and Lucy Majojo, a law student. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for making time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good morning to you too.
Feedback from our last week's session points to the need of having legislative reform when it comes to the drug and substance abuse issue, and the scourge has spread to high school going children, and this is worrisome. It is really worrisome. Some laws have been put in place to address this problem, but the question is, are they effective enough to drive this scourge away? I have two guests, as I've said, are joining me to discuss the gaps in the drug and substance abuse legal system. Say What is celebrating 20 years of existence while championing young people's sexual and reproductive health in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa under the banner Say What at 20, and the primary goal really is to see a generation of healthy young people in Zimbabwe and in the region. Young people are encouraged to call 577 anytime. Take this number down, save this number 577. You can call this number for all your health related challenges and psychosocial support. Remember, this program is brought to us by Say What with support from the Embassy of Sweden in Zimbabwe. It is the Zimpapers radio broadcast simulcast. We're live right here on Star FM, sounding good all the time, on Yami Yami FM as well as on Diamond FM. Also welcome our listeners and our viewers on Facebook. We are live on Facebook as well. Let's start with you, Christian.
Yeah.
May you highlight and explain gaps that are in our legal systems vis-a-vis drug and substance abuse contemporary fight?
All right, thank you so much for that question. Firstly, our laws in Zimbabwe, we have quite a number of them that deals with drug and substance abuse. I would like to mention the major instrument that deals with these issues. Firstly, there's the Dangerous Drugs Act, there's the Medicines and Allied Substance Control Act, and also there's the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act. Among these three major instruments that I've highlighted, it is the criminal law that criminalizes possession and at times use of drugs and substance abuse. Now, we taking a closer look at these instruments, we can see the gaps that are there in our law. Whilst we are proud that we have these existing laws in fighting drug abuse, but we can also as well see the gaps. Firstly, we do not have deterrent measures that are enough.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we can have someone who is charged with distribution of drugs, and then we can see that person being charged with it and convicted and getting a fine as a punishment. Those kind of measures do not deter enough for would-be offenders. So it would be great if we have stiffer penalties. So the number one gap is we do not have stiffer penalties for distributors of drugs. Number two, our laws in Zimbabwe, they are focused on the crime and on the person doing the crime, but they do not really focus on the end user. Though our laws are punitive, they are not restorative in nature. They do not focus on the end user. Currently in Zimbabwe, the majority, or if not all, of the rehab facilities that we have, they are owned by private institutions. And mostly those private institutions, they're expensive for the ordinary citizen in Zimbabwe. And these laws, they do not have an obligation to the government to say the government is obliged to build rehab facilities. So that way, the laws do not take a human rights approach in dealing with this issue, but rather it focuses on the crime itself, but do not focus now on the end user. So the government is yet to have rehab facilities that will go a long way in rehabilitation and reintegration of the end user back into society. So I think those are the major gaps that we see in that issue.
Thank you for elaborating on that. If you're just tuning in, this program is brought to us by Say What with support from the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe. We're talking about drug and substance abuse, the gifts in Zimbabwe's legal system. You can also weigh in, and if you have any questions, contributions, our WhatsApp line is 0775 897 897. We welcome your contributions on that number. Coming back to you again, lawyer,
Right.
what is your advice to the Parliament of Zimbabwe and the government itself when it comes to drug and substance abuse fight, particularly on rescuing adolescents and young people who are then caught up in the drug and substance abuse snare?
My advice, firstly, to the Parliament or the lawmakers, firstly, would be to reform the law. When we reform the law, we then need the law that are restorative in nature. We need laws that also focus on the end user of the drug or substance or the substance that are illegal per se. So we need such laws that also focus on reintegration of the end user back into society. We also need laws that is stiffer penalties for distributors and also even users of drugs, like the president correctly pointed out when he was addressing on the 21st day of February. He said we need to make sure that when we find someone, be it an user of the drugs, we need to squeeze that person
and wait for them to be sober.
Exactly. We
and
need
then
to squeeze the small user so that they spit out the bigger user. We need to squeeze them so that they tell us where they are getting the drugs.
Okay.
So if we have stiffer penalties even on ordinary citizens that are using the drugs, so that we get to the bottom of the issue. So I think there should be stiffer penalties, both the users and the distributors. So if we have such laws, so we need reform of that laws, and we need to combat crime with full force. We need all hands on deck, because the problem that we're facing right now, it's also causing other problems. When a person is under the influence of drugs, we are now experiencing high levels of spread of HIV, theft, robbery, all other crimes stemming from the use of drugs. So the Parliament should reform the law, and the government also should try to build facilities that may be accessible to everyone or the ordinary citizen in Zimbabwe.
Does really make a lot of sense. 0775 897 897. You can also hit us up and tell us your thoughts, what you think, your contributions, your questions as well. Coming to you, Melusi, what is happening at colleges concerning drug and substance abuse? Chichiruitika, what's happening?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. But I feel like the starting point is us to really get into the statistics. Statistics will tell you that 43% of the high school students have come across drugs.
43%.
43%. Right? So already we see that 43% of tomorrow's future may already have been affected by the existence of drugs per se. And those 43 are the same people who graduate into coming into university. Those people as well have people whom they influence. So we see that the number becomes even more than 43%. So when you then come to a college setup, right, you realize that number one, individuals are making use of dangerous drugs. Number two, individuals are also manufacturing even other substances such that they do get high. But then the problem as well is us then not looking for the root cause. In most institutions, you realize that majority of the people are facing mental health problems. And because they are facing the mental health problems, for example, you know that ukarwara panapa unoenda kupari unorapwa. But then if you have a mental problem, there might not be a parenya to fix the mental problem. So now in colleges, we are yet and to particularly develop our colleges to an extent that things like rehabilitation do exist. So because of that, in colleges, individuals are suffering from drugs, or if not, from the effect of drugs themselves. Because I feel like other crimes do then stem from what? From drugs. For example, an individual might as well particularly lose control, and every other things do follow from them. So I feel like this is what exists at universities, and people are suffering, and it is now the right time that the government does step in, as we have seen it step in, because already the government door-to-door campaigns searching drugs and and then you realize that it's something that is what particularly welcome to enable to ensure that we protect the future.
it is important that we protect the future. I agree with you, Melusi. What legal instruments would you recommend to be put in place to address the abuse of drugs, especially those that are locally and indigenously manufactured, your mutoriros?
But then, like, the starting point is our definition of drugs within the Dangerous Drugs Act, right, might not be exhaustive enough as to particularly capture all the other drugs that do exist in present day society. You might realize that we do have a lot of drugs which are now being used by the individuals in nature, and as are my streets everywhere, they are being abused, and these drugs might not necessarily be captured in our definition of drugs. And ukabatwa une some of those drugs auna mosha per se, because you cannot be convicted of a crime that is not there. So the starting point is that our law is not exhaustive in nature, in the definition of what is a drug, in the definition of what is a substance. So because of that, we leave more people hanging around with drugs and substances, and they are left unguarded, right? Why? Because our laws are not exhaustive. So the starting point might as well to look into the development of the law, harnessing it such that the law is exhaustive in nature and captures even the contemporary drugs which are being abused. For example, glue, we speak about mutoriro, we speak about malides. Malides are assisted safe. Right now I'm out of Garamrima because like in an university setup, ukasiya malides every time. So you see, the idea is our law need to be exhaustive in nature, to be able to capture the contemporary drugs, because the law should meet the realities of the modern day society, which is what we think the parliament as well has been doing lately though. But then there is more that needs to be done. And as well as we'll look as well into the statistics, say in relation to Mbanje. You realize that 80% of it is being smuggled into the country, whilst 20% is being locally produced. The statistics will show you that originally vanhu vari kupinda nezvinhu zvinonyangadza muZimbabwe. So like because of that, our local supply of drugs iri kukwira. Why? Because we have a higher rate of people importing those particular drugs. So because of that, supply yakawandisa market. So there are two things to do. We look into the supply and we look into the demand. The supply side, to ensure supply reduction, the government should consider a minimum mandatory sentence for distributors of those particular drugs and for drug lords. A minimum mandatory sentence is defined in State versus Madondo. It's a higher level and a stiffer penalty. And those stiff penalties are deterrent enough to ensure that individuals do not per se abuse the particular drugs. For example, you realize in the crime of stock theft, there was a time stock theft payakapisa zvekudaro, but then paka introduced a minimum mandatory sentence for stock theft, and we saw the numbers falling down. And using the same rationale, if that same rationale is going to be applied and a research is going to be done, we might realize that this might work. This is something not new. This is something that has been done in Malaysia. This is something that has been done in particular USA. And then as well look into the demand side, things like rehabilitation, things like community outreach, and also mental health campaigns might help us as well reduce this. So we have said about exhaustion of drugs in terms of our laws, and number two, introduction of, say, minimum mandatory sentence for the drug lords and not necessarily for the end user. Why? Because if we do it for the end user, we fill in prisons with my low level income earners who might not even view such a punishment as punitive. Is want to not know. So because of that,
you could have a point there
for those particular rehabilitation works. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those recommendations, Melusi. Coming back to you, Christian, what is your recommendation to the civil society organizations who are fighting the drug and substance abuse menace, including in schools? You have a minute to do this.
All right, thank you so much. A minute. The civic society has been doing much to fight drug and substance abuse. But I think they should also increase, especially in campaigns and awareness. the civic society, as we have already seen in organizations such as Say What, Mwanaskana Wanasi, Modiwa Foundation, these organizations have been reviving youth clubs and positive youth facilities in a way of keeping our youths off the streets. So if we have an increase in these institutions where our youth can spend their day, because drugs like the old saying, in idle mind. So let's increase positive youth facilities so that we occupy our youths with doing something, and also we increase our outreach, we increase our campaigns and awareness, be it in schools, and we do even grassroots level, going to schools, explaining to them the effects of drugs. So I think that would be my recommendation to civic society.
Thank you so much. And you can keep your messages coming 0775 897 897, talking about drug and substance abuse, the gaps in Zimbabwe's legal system. Melusi, you're parting short.
I think this is the right time that we unite as a nation across all different denominations. Kanakurukuma Church, let's preach the gospel that allow individuals to be able to be united. And when we are united, we can be able to fight this common enemy. And then we can be able as well to realize that let's create a better youth for the people. I think we can do that through as well equipping one with the spare time. In idle mind is the devil's territory. So let's ensure that there are rehabilitation facilities, we make use of sports, we make use of other gap fillers that are positive to ensure youth develop. I think that will be enough.
Thank you so much, Christian Chikengeje, a lawyer, and Melusi Majojo, a law student, helping us with this conversation. Very powerful recommendations there. We're talking about drug and substance abuse, the gaps in Zimbabwe's legal system. And you can call 577 toll-free for any health-related challenges and psychosocial support. This program, of course, brought to us by the Embassy of Sweden in Zimbabwe. And remember, Say What is 1020 this year, and that is 2 decades of championing reproductive health for young people. We do this again next Thursday